Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved cars, racing, and motorsports. And while driving or racing wasn't accessible to me until later in life, I was able to explore and enjoy those spaces through sim racing. And that passion has stuck with me as I've grown, and my sim racing setup has also grown so much with me into what I have today. It's honestly amazing to see how much things have developed over the 20 plus years I've been in this space, with quality direct drive force feedback steering wheels, load cell pedals, sim rigs, and other equipment becoming more and more accessible. But I would say that getting on a PC is essential to really get into sim racing. Sure, you could play on a console, but that really limits your options on what titles you can play, and you can forget about mods. Committing to console also forces you to use a console-compatible wheel and pedals configuration, limiting things even more. And it's true that you could spend a few $1,000s on getting a top-of-the-line gaming PC to ensure peak performance, but what if you're on a limited budget? If we need to make every dollar count, what would be the best basic setup for a 1080p and 60 FPS experience? That's what I feel should be a baseline for a solid sim racing setup. So, how much CPU and GPU horsepower is really necessary to achieve that ideal experience? How well will performance scale up with hardware upgrades? Which upgrade paths are best? These are all questions that I'm looking to answer. We'll be testing 9 different sim racing titles today, and I've got the results here for you now. So, let's dive in. Here's a collection of parts that we'll be testing today. Everything shown other than the SSD was purchased from the used market. eBay tends to have the best selection, but slightly higher prices, while local listing sites like Facebook Marketplace can offer the best value if you're willing to do some digging. And be prepared to test anything bought locally to avoid picking up bad parts. The platform we'll be working with is the HP Z240 workstation. I picked this one up with the motherboard and power supply for $50, and what I really like about this system is that it uses DDR4 memory and also has an NVMe slot. If we upgrade to something else in the future, there's a good chance that these parts can be reused, and as a workstation PC, it has a 400 watt power supply with a 6-pin PCIe power connector that should be able to handle a variety of mid-range power-efficient GPUs. I'd avoid picking up something like this Dell Optiplex, which I actually tried originally, but its power supply was just not strong enough to handle either of the GPUs that we're testing today. So with all that in mind, we'll be starting out by building around this i5-6500 from Intel. This CPU has 4 cores and no multi-threading capabilities, and it just isn't powerful enough by today's standards for most modern and popular games, but should be a good baseline for us to start with. I've paired it with 2 8GB sticks of 3200 MHz memory from Teamforce, but any DDR4 memory should be fine as these systems aren't too dependent on fast memory speeds to ensure proper performance. However, it is best to get the fastest memory possible while keeping the price near what DDR4 market value is if you plan on keeping this memory and bringing it over to a future system upgrade. At the time of this video being published, DDR4 memory can be found for around $30 for a 16GB kit. Thankfully, the price of high-speed NVMe storage has plummeted recently, so a 1TB drive like this Crucial P3 can be had for just $45 brand new. It's a great value and another component that can be brought along for a future upgrade. And for the graphics cards, we'll be comparing this PNY GTX 1050 Ti versus an Asus GTX 1070. The GTX 1050 Ti has long been known to be a great lower-end gaming GPU, while the GTX 1070 has been a solidly performing mid-range gaming GPU at 1080p for many years. Both these cards have seen a dramatic drop in price as they just aren't as well suited for many of the modern AAA games being released. That being said, they can still serve us well today. The GTX 1050 Ti does have only 4GB of VRAM, but how much of a hindrance will that be compared to the 8GB of VRAM the GTX 1070 has? And we'll be needing this 6-pin to 8-pin PCIe power adapter. these can be found quite cheaply, and it shouldn't cause us any issues running this card at stock settings, since the GTX 1070 only consumes 150 watts total, which is what the PCIe slot and the 6-pin connector can supply when combined. But we can see what sort of power draw it has under real-world conditions. So, I wanted to start out with Sim Racing Experience. This is a great game for people to start out on, as it's actually free to play. There's a few cars that you can start out with, and it's very inexpensive to be able to get all of the content, which is a ton of different cars and tracks. There's online competitions, but yeah, can't speak highly enough of how much I enjoy Racing, the force feedback. And as you can see, it runs really well on both of these systems, or both of these configurations. So you can see, since they're pretty much within the margin of error on both sides in each pass, it's within the point of, I'd say, being CPU limited, especially since it runs on DirectX 9. I do believe that if you want to get better performance on this game, I think it's going to need more CPU horsepower. And the upside, though, is that it does have great potential to run on triple screens or ultra-wide monitors with pretty accessible hardware, and I think that's really something to explore, maybe something I can do in a future video and show what would be the best triple screen budget setup, maybe? Something to look into, but yeah. Okay, so up next we've got Dirt Rally. This is an older game. You can't actually buy it on Steam anymore, but the keys are available online for just a few dollars, so I think it's really great value if you've not actually played this game before. You can see that just looking at the numbers, it is a little bit more GPU limited with the 1050 Ti, and that the 1070 does see performance scale up a little bit. But it's still very playable on the 1050 Ti setup, but you could definitely tell it's more towards high refresh rates, smooth experience, fully above 60 frames per second, even with the 1% and 0.1% lows. So yeah, great setup to get into some rallying, and a lot of good content in there to explore, especially things like Pikes Peak, which don't show up, I believe, in the Dirt Rally 2 or in the new WRC game. So yeah, jump into Dirt Rally at the next opportunity. So here we are in F1 23. Now, I would say this is very playable on both setups. The 0.1% lows do get a little bit too low for my liking on the 1050 Ti, and this is in the most extreme conditions I think that you'll see in the game, with the wet and all the background track objects and things like that in this game at Monaco. So you may see better performance on the 1050 Ti at other locations or other situations, but the 1070 definitely sees a step up. So a great showing by the CPU in this game as well, where it's not really holding either graphics card back and you are seeing good scaling. So yeah, great game for anyone to jump into if you're a Formula 1 fan, if you're looking to get into F1. There's a lot of cool things in this game to enjoy as well. So yeah, definitely something to check out and enjoy with this basic sim racing setup. So now we're into Automobilista 2, also known as AMS2. It's very playable on both, but definitely much better on the 1070, and you can see that through the frame time graphs that we have at the bottom of the overlays at the top of the screen. So on the left side, you can see that the 1050 Ti, while it's still getting good average frame rates, it's definitely more erratic and less smooth. It's not showing up as much with the way the capture card is capturing everything, but the frame time graph is really the way to identify the performance on that level. And you can see on the right that the 1070 is doing much better. It's getting a much smoother performance overall, and while this game does seem to be CPU limited by what we're seeing, it's still utilizing the CPU very well and allowing it to scale up with the 1070. So this is one of those games where I think we might see better performance with a better CPU on both sides, but it's something that we'll have to test in the next video. I also have to say it just looks absolutely incredible. One of the best looking games, I think. This game just has really nice reflections, really nice just textures, and just a great aesthetic overall, and just the fact that it can look so good and play so well is just a testament to how well optimized this game is. So now we can jump into Dirt Rally 2. This game is also very enjoyable. I think it is a good step up from the original Dirt Rally. There are some things that are lacking, like I mentioned before. Pikes Peak, it's a shame that that's not in this, but I understand that they have to make decisions on which things to include or not include. So still a great game, a great experience, and I would say definitely preferable over EA's WRC right now, given how that game has been performing and seems like a stuttery mess, and they need to fix that and update that and get that working before I'm going to invest in that or put any time into that or recommend that to anyone. So Dirt Rally 2 is also, like I said, a great game for playing on either one of these systems. It does scale up a little bit with the GTX 1070, but the 1050 Ti still does a good job. Other than the 0.1% lows getting underneath 60, I think overall it's still very good, and either setup would run you very well in this game. So now on to R Factor 2. This game is quite playable, but we did have to drop it down to the medium preset, which this game doesn't look great even at the highest settings, so it's not the end of the world, but something to note is that it does seem like this game is a little bit CPU limited, just given how the average frame rate was quite good, but the 1% lows and 0.1% lows seem to struggle a little bit. So this is one of those games where I do feel that it could benefit from having a better CPU as well. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the way that this game scales up with a better CPU. Will it do better with 4 cores, 8 threads, or does it actually need more CPU cores? It's something that we can explore and see if we can get to the bottom of that. So here we are in KartCraft. Now, something to note about this game is that it doesn't seem like it's being updated by the developers currently, so something to be aware of if you're expecting more from this. If you're looking to have fun with a kart sim that really nails the kart physics and feel of the knife edge of a kart, this game is definitely something to get into, but do note that this is at the absolute lowest settings that we can get, so the game does look pretty terrible. I think the issue is that with this running on the Unreal Engine 4, it just struggles with CPUs that aren't that strong, so you can see here that it's pretty much nailing the CPU close to 100% pretty regularly, while the GPUs aren't being utilized that much, and the results are within the margin of error, with the GTX 1070 actually having slightly worse 1% and 0.1% lows, which really shows that it is it's just struggling with the CPU performance. And another one where I'm curious if a better CPU, whether more cores or more threads in a hyper-threading situation, would help this. Something that we'll be able to look into. So now we're doing a scenario in BeamNG. This is a really fun title to just mess around and enjoy sim racing type gear and equipment in a non-racing setting. Although they do have racing in BeamNG as well, there's a lot of non-racing things, and the destructible nature of the vehicles is also fun, and again, things like this chase situation is very enjoyable. Now, this does look like it's CPU limited. It's something that seems to struggle with not having enough CPU performance, and I think while the captures look okay, it's another one where the average frame rate is better, while there's significant stuttering that made it very difficult to really play and enjoy this game. So one that I'm hoping to see better performance with a better CPU, or a CPU with more threads and cores. And finally, we are on to Assetto Corsa Competizione. Now, I would call this unplayable. It was very difficult to even just try to get through the first few corners, as you're going to see. It was stuttering very badly, and the zeros for the 1% and 0.1% lows will be very visible soon. You could also see that the CPU on both of these configurations is smashed at 100%, which is really interesting that the developers say that this is system minimum requirements is an i3-6100, which has 2 cores and 4 threads, so I don't see how that's possible unless there's some other way to run this, or if it's just not been updated since the game's been updated. This is another one that runs on Unreal Engine 4, and I think absolutely would benefit from more CPU horsepower. So we'll see if maybe we can do that on this platform, or if we'll need to jump onto a different platform to really have a good playable experience in this game. This game's very popular, and it's unfortunate that it just can't really run this game. So we need something better, yeah. So the total cost of everything here, depending on which configuration you go with, is either $180 or so with the 1050 Ti or $220 with the 1070. So I would say it's definitely worth it to jump up to the 1070 if you can splurge for the extra $40 or so to get one of those. And again, you may be able to do better depending on how you do with either finding things in the used market or even coming across things for free. You'd be surprised how often people might drop older hardware off or give away older hardware if you ask or know of places where you could find them. So do some hunting and see what you can find. But I did mention that there's maybe the possibility for looking into a better CPU, and I actually do have an i7-6700, which is a significant step up. It is twice the price of the 6500, going from like $25 for the 6500 to $50 or so, $60 sometimes, $70 maybe even for the 6700, so a little bit more expensive, but is it worth it? Will it actually give us a performance jump going from 4 cores to 4 cores and 8 threads? So we'll see if the games that we're testing actually benefit from multi-threading. My hope is that games like ACC, BeamNG, and KartCraft as well, anything with the Unreal Engine or those types of CPU limited situations, that we should see a bump up in performance. So I'll be doing some testing and hopefully have a video out sometime maybe next week for you to look into and to learn more about. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.